This is IBM Museum. Tonight I'm making another attempt at a video that for the last two nights, I kind of struggled a little bit. The system was giving me a little bit of issues. I had some things come up, including a reference diskette image that just quit on me. And so I didn't really have enough content for a video and ended up coming up with a solution to use my spare planer for the 65SX in front of the system in the case, and all I'm doing is having the hard drive up in that case. I haven't pulled it out. I'm just running up that power cable and SCSI interface cable to it from the planer of the 65SX in this instance. And I wanted to look at a little bit more detail of to see if I could spot anything on the hard drive, whether there was an operating system or anything like that installed, as well as follow up on the earlier video of that unboxing of the IBM SCSI adapters that came from Japan. I had actually, one of them had a microcode version, and I'll explain that a little bit, that process a little bit later on, that I had not seen before or not been able to check out. It was not listed in the chart that I'm compiling of those microcode versions. So I wanted to go through and actually test that adapter to see if I could determine some information. So tonight we're just going to resume a little bit of the work on the 65SX, and I'll go over those IBM SCSI concepts as well, because there's a little bit of a process to those adapters and how they interface to the system. This is the first time that we've seen the IBM SCSI side of things in my videos of having that adapter, and we can see how the basics are set up and work for that in that process. So I'm going to go off camera for the moment as a turnaround and work with the benched planer, kind of describe. Later on, I'll actually come back on camera. I'll have the keyboard in front of me as we go through and do some of the reference diskette functions as well. And so let's get started. So on the earlier video, it actually mentioned, and I tried to find even the time spot and just where I'd gone over it, but I did get a comment later on that talked about being a little bit confused about the battery holder on the speaker pillar, and I've just pulled this out of the case for connecting up to the bench planer, and I had seen that empty spot, and just thinking of the MUL 60s, MUL 80s in the same tower case, I thought, oh, that battery's gone. But there's only two leads coming from that. That goes to the speaker. That doesn't even have contacts or anything else. And it's actually where the 65SX is another model, just like the we've seen on the 55SX, the smaller desktop version, that has these Dallas modules in there. And we've seen where I go through and modify these and put on a battery holder and everything else on there. And that's where the configuration of the system is held, is within these Dallas modules. So instead of actually replacing a battery or putting a battery on the system, it's actually going through and working with these modules. And what I've done here is this is my battery attachment that I do to where I've filed away some of the side for the gain a contact on where the internal battery is on those Dallas modules, and disconnected it, add the leads in for an external battery. And I don't have any coin cell in there right now, but we will briefly. And there's kind of a reason I'm going through from this video, and we're just going through just like we replace the module or put a new battery into a PS2, of going through that initial configuration. Now, I did get the 65SX also has the one of these modules that's 2 kilobyte of non-volatile RAM as well. And this battery is probably flat for the length of time it's been in service as well. But I've picked up some other modules have come in the mail in the last few days. And so I've picked up a supply of those. Looks like I've got about 5 on hand. I'll have to look at the timing. And I was even, in some cases, I was picking up modules that were a little bit slower because the physical placement of the internal battery and all that will be the same. And I want to work at it with the Dremel and figure out where the internal battery is and figure out how to modify them just like I do with the Dallas modules. So it's enough to go through and run it from just the DS 1287 module that I've got the external battery. We don't need to necessarily worry about that other module at the moment. And I've got the speaker connected here. We're going through. I have a diskette drive attached to the unit, and I've got copies of the reference diskette and another startup diskette that I've made for this purposes. And this is the adapter, that Tribble adapter that I said was missing from the configuration. Just had the drive and the cable in there. I didn't see where the SCSI adapter had been moved out of there. And it was probably for me actually going through and checking it, because one of these chips is the SCSI controller microcode. And I was interested in just charting these and figuring out what different versions existed and things like that. And so I'd probably pulled the adapter that was on here at one point. And I just grabbed one of these adapters. I grabbed a few of them and dropped one in. I didn't really pay attention too much to this, to the microcode or anything else of that version. Although we'll take a look at that at a later point here. And so we've got the benched power supply as well. I'm giving power to the SCSI drive up here, and then of course have the SCSI cable running up there. We've got the IBM SIMs that we put in. These are 4 megabyte a piece. What I'm actually going to do in this situation though is I'm going to just pull this additional memory, because we're not needing it just to go through and get the system up and going. It's going to be faster to get through that RAM count and everything else, just not to be quite the same length of time to boot up and everything else. And in this case, it's just like we're starting with a fresh battery. We'll pop the coin cell in there, and I'll relocate back to the being in front of the system, and we'll go through and power it up with the gain some video capture from the system. Okay, and I have things moved around, so we're going to go ahead and turn on the power to the power supply. And I'll get the keyboard so I have that in front of me. Go through, and of course, with that memory adapter out there, it just counts to the 8 megabytes of RAM on the planer, and we get the standard 162, 163 errors. And since we have the reference diskette in there, this is a later model PS2 that sees that and goes right away to booting from that reference diskette after giving the double beep. Sometimes these reference diskettes loading, especially when the system has got that fresh battery, doesn't have a configuration, the diskette drive can be pretty silent, and it takes a little bit of time. You don't want to be too hasty in thinking that nothing is going on with the system. Just give it a little bit of time. And I hope I have things positioned correctly on the screen. So this is something that we'll see with a fresh battery. And in fact, I can move. No, it didn't work. Move off the system, just that webcam overview. But it's telling us if we press enter, it's going to go through and restart and try and recover the configuration. If we do escape, it's just going to go through and it'll run through automatic configuration. And in this case, we want to go through and just press escape, because we're not going to get anywhere if it just reboots and finds out that it has to run automatic configuration anyway. So, and that's a standard auto config where we press the on the initial screen, press F8 to get forward in there, and then when we press enter, it actually runs the automatic configuration. Okay, and it says configuring SCSI devices underneath this. Please wait. And we can hear a little bit of that SCSI hard drive going active and spinning up. It's kind of hard to see on this small view, but I mean that access light on the SCSI drive went, which is amber lit as well. So automatic configuration is completed. We press enter. Now it still should give us another error for the time and date. And that's just a sequence that a lot of the PS2s do, that it wants to run that automatic configuration as that first step. Doesn't allow you to get in there and to do the time and date, to set those values before running automatic configuration. So it's a lot of a two-step process where you have to leave that reference diskette in the drive. Okay, so 163 error. And again, we've left the reference diskette in there, so it's going to boot straight away from that. And that's a little bit quicker that time. The system has got all the configuration otherwise worked out. Okay, time and date not set. And telling us to go to the continue until the main menu appears, select set features, and then set date and time. Okay. Okay, 19. Okay, time and day have been set. To press enter, Okay, and we have to go through F3, exit that screen, and F3 for exit here. Okay, and let's actually take, I guess we can use this moment to go through, and we're going to look at set configuration. Sorry, I had to cough there, and rather than on the cough button, I just muted. All right, excuse me, I paused the recording. So we would go through here to set and view SCSI device configuration. Okay. There's not really any way. That's a little bit better, maybe to show things. And so here it's showing the SCSI adapter has the SCSI ID of 7, which is very typical for IBM SCSI. And then there's a fixed disk or a hard drive at SCSI ID 6. And it's of a capacity of 120 megabytes. So that's a drive that we're trying to see what it has on it. I'm going to go through and exit. We're going to exit here and exit here. Now, when we press enter, it's going to go through and reboot. I'm going to go through actually and pull the reference diskette out of the drive. And we'll just eject it halfway so it doesn't run. Because I'm wanting to try and boot off that hard drive. Okay, it's counted to the 8 megabyte. Okay, single beep. No errors displayed. Okay, but it still dropped us into ROM basic. And just like that hard drive, it's just not able to boot for that for some reason. And I wanted to go through and just try and see. I've got another SCSI hard drive here as well, and if I can get that to, if that has an operating system, and I didn't really go through and prep this drive or anything else, but I wanted to plug it in and see what we can learn. I'm going to go ahead and power the system down, and we'll go through, and we're just going to kind of pop it in the space that we have. And luckily we've got another drive connection, another power lead. They're right where we need them. And I'm just going to have that kind of sit in that place there. And let's go ahead and power the system back up. Like I say, at least we've got that additional memory adapter out of there, and so it goes through that boot process. And there's no need to kind of go through and have that extra memory in there as we're going through and trying to get this working. Okay, and I heard, and I know it's kind of hard to see in that small picture, but I was seeing that yellow light come on. Okay, we get a double beep, and we get a 162 error. And so I'm going to go through and actually put the reference diskette back in the drive and press F1 on the keyboard. Okay, so it got into the, get the keyboard up where I can hold it. Okay, so configuration error. Be sure all devices to the computer are turned on. And remember, we just added that just that other drive. And so we're going to run through automatic configuration again. Maybe I'll get that up there. Okay. Configuring SCSI devices. Okay, automatic configuration is complete. When enter is pressed, the computer restarts. We're going to press enter. And I'm going to go through and eject that reference diskette again. And the thought is that we're trying to boot off of this other SCSI hard drive that we've added in. And for adding a SCSI hard drive, in this case a SCSI device, on that chain, since it's IBM SCSI, we had to go through the configuration. Okay, and it still dropped us into ROM Basic. And so that other drive is even not functional as well. Or we can't boot from it for some reason. I'm not sure the condition of it or anything like that. I'm going to go through and I'm going to power the system off again. Let's go ahead and pull that drive out of there. Since that didn't work, and go ahead and power on the system again. Goes through and counts the 8 megabyte of memory. Okay, it's spun up that hard drive that's still in there. Sounds like it's trying to read it. Okay, and we get a particular error in this case. We could look that up online, and the 162 error again. Let's go ahead and put the reference diskette back in. Do an F1. Okay, and this should come up fairly quick. Okay, configuration error. Okay, enter. Okay, so it's describing the error here as SCSI device error. Error occurred while testing a non-removable device, a fixed disk, saying that error occurred. The device that the error occurred on is not recognized. Continue until the main menu appears. Select test the computer and determine the cause of this error and what action to take. Now, the same way that we went through and when we added a SCSI drive, we had to go through that reference diskette. The same thing for removing it. That each time you do something like that, it does actually change the configuration of the system, even though you'd think that the SCSI controller is just going to run the attached devices, and going through and adding or subtracting a SCSI device off the system should not make that much difference. Let's go through and set and view SCSI device configuration. Configuring SCSI devices. Okay. SCSI device configuration could not find the fixed disks that were previously configured. If you did not alter the configuration, and we know that what we did was pulling the hard drive off the system, and it's telling us if we'll have a selection on the next screen about the keep and save or keep and remove warning. In fact, let me go through, actually move this so we can see in the top here. And so it sees the one fixed disk that we had in there as that 120 megabyte, but then the second one that was there on SCSI ID 0, it doesn't see that. And so we have a selection of either keep or remove. And of course, we want to select remove in this case because we did remove that drive. It's just the system is remembering that we removed it. And then F10 to save that configuration that we're going to remove it. Okay, save configuration is complete. Enter. And so we are going to F3 exit. And we're going through to exit out of that again. And I'm going to leave the reference diskette in there this time, just to make sure that we don't encounter any further errors. Okay, and we just had the single beep. Okay, and so the system didn't have any errors. Let's look through the set configuration. Okay, set and view. And it's back to the initial SCSI device configuration that we had with just that single drive again. And it didn't really run through some of the things that can, some of the little hiccups that can can crop up sometimes. And sometimes when you just encounter error after error, you'll go through and you remove the device, and it still has errors or things that crop up. And sometimes it's really good just to go through, get it to the configuration that you want, and disconnect the battery when the system's off. Let the battery let that configuration be lost again. And of course, with the Dallas module, you don't really have any ability to pull the module. Even if you pull the module off the planer, it still holds that configuration with the internal battery. But in this case, we could go through and we could remove that coin cell, just like we could with some late model PS2s, or removing that battery if it's an earlier PS2 that uses one of those. And I want to go through and we'll check the reference diskette now that we didn't have any errors. And I'm going to put the startup diskette in there to boot from that instead of, since we can't seem to boot from that hard drive. And one of the things I was wanting to check, as I said, with that, just as a follow-up for that unboxing before of these SCSI adapters from Japan, let's go through, get it rebooting. I need to get this keyboard up to where I can access it easy again. And that's, as I say, just a shortcut. Or if you keep running into walls of that SCSI device configuration, the system just doesn't want to work with you. Try to go through the steps to disconnect the battery if you can, to be able to just configure the system from scratch is often an easy enough way to do things. I guess I have to put the dashes here. I didn't have to put the dashes before. Oh, well, I'm not changing any time and date anyway. I've set that previously, so I can just, I could just press the enter key. So on this boot diskette, I just have a single little utility. It'll show the command com and things like that, but the SCSILEVL.com, and that was a program that IBM had included with some of the SCSI adapters, and years ago I noticed it and kind of ran through it. Ultimately, it was for determining the microcode version on the newer systems that could actually had a flash EEPROM or a flash memory for their microcontroller RAM, and or ROM in this case, read-only memory, and but I noticed it could do a little bit more than what on all the things it could be run on. And I noticed that there were some cases with adapters and systems that had IBM SCSI on them that it didn't work. And I went through and rewrote the program. And this one I can easily release out there for the people that have that IBM SCSI on their PS2s as a way to go through and run this program. And then I'll actually have my update that that I can put up as well for people to run through on other systems. I can tell what systems it kind of covers with that original IBM version and what my system does. cover as well. I wrote my program to where it covers just every possible combination of system that could have that IBM SCSI on it. It goes through and reports it. And in this case, it's showing that the microcode version on this Tribble adapter is that 12 hex. And that's, I think, kind of a mid-level version for the Tribble. I mean, it is quite an older card. And so the SCSI level is working on it, but I wanted to also run that on the adapters I have here. And these are effectively equivalents of the Tribble. They're the same adapter description file. There was, and these two are near identical. And I'm sure that's why Sandy included them, that in one case it has where there's a microcode that I'm familiar with, that version, the 54G1800, but there was one that I didn't have on my chart yet, and that's that it's a 58G what did it say? That one's a little bit hard to read. 1801. And I didn't have this one in my chart. This is a single number difference between them. And so I wanted to run that SCSI level on this adapter as well. So let's go through and power down. And even though these are equivalent, we're going to see see if anything crops up from just swapping out this adapter one for one. Putting this adapter in there and put back in slot 8. Okay. And let's go ahead and power the system up again. We'll see if we have any. Okay, we heard that hard drive spin up again, even though we can't read it otherwise. And it tries to read it. Okay, gave us a single beep. And this system is actually fairly well behaved for me tonight, considering the last two nights on what I was writing through. And of course, just enter, since we already had that set. And we're going to try the SCSILEVL command again. Okay. And in this case, it actually tells us that's 25 hex for the microcode version. I looked this up earlier, and the known version I had, this 54G1800, is actually a microcode version of 26 hex. So even though this adapter that we have in there, they've incremented that number by 1. It's got the 54G1801 FRU code on that chip. It is actually a lower version of the microcode. And so when I was doing this the last two nights, what it was actually doing is I put this short SCSI A16 as the adapters, and those, like I say, are the functional equivalent of the Tribbles. And it was actually not reading the SCSI level, and I actually had to swap over to the other card. It was throwing up some SCSI adapter configuration errors, and like I say, a lot of time, if you go round and round with that for just even longer than a few minutes, go to the working configuration that you should have on the system and just pull that battery and put it back in. And I'm glad I had less troubles tonight. I was just looking at whatever errors I'd encounter. I would go through and respond to those in kind, and the system was nicer to me tonight. So this will ultimately be a little bit shorter video, and I'm going through for the same thing as that SCSI level. There's also the older hard drive interface of this is a ESDI, and I even forget what the acronym is now, but it's this was another hard drive controller that were on some of the Model 60s and 80s, a real limited number of those tower systems, because this is the controller it still had where the drive needed that drive power, and so it could only be put on those tower models that had those additional power connectors like this. And in this case, it's the same sort of thing, that they have it has a microcode version on these EEPROMs. And I've actually pulled these EEPROMs and checked them now. And the nice thing is, when I look at the code that's on the EEPROM, I get a version number and the date that it was released. So there's actually 7 different versions, and I'm able to. I had 4 of those versions based on what the FRU was on the chip, and I'm able to come up with a very similar chart on this to work through, and having similar code that would run on these adapters in the system and tell that microcode version as well. And just still some of the work that's going on these PS2 systems, just to make them relevant, to work with them, to go through and to utilize them in at least some form of what they were designed for, and still learning about them and still documenting factors with the communities that we have on the PS2s, just like the news group that's gone over the matter of decades, covering them, and now Facebook group and other individuals going through and still discovering things about the systems and documenting them. So if you like this video, click on that like button. I'm going to get sitting down, get the camera back on me. Okay. And by all means, click on that like button if you like this content. And subscribe to my channel. We're going to have all kinds of content like this. I'll try and be descriptive and show kind of the ins and outs, sometimes where you can find this material online, and the little hints on going through the SCSI configuration. I was actually surprised I didn't have to go through all the errors of that it was the system was kicking up the other day. And I don't know why it was different tonight, but that's fine. We had less of the warts in this case, and get a slightly shorter video, which is welcome as well. But that's all I have for now. This is IBM Museum. Thank you.